Hello, my name is Tony Dong. Trump should keep tweeting. We deserve to know who our president is. Donald Trump is once again under fire for remarks about women and blood, this time commenting on Morning Joe's Mika Brzezinski allegedly approaching him while still bleeding from a facelift. The bizarre and graphic image offered by the President of the United States about a journalist who has criticized him has, unsurprisingly, drawn an outraged response from across the political internet. Trump's Twitter usage has already set off much concern, some of it from political scientists. Paul Musgrave wrote a few weeks ago that Trump should stop tweeting as a matter of national security. Seth Marskett wrote that Twitter should shut down Trump's account because his bullying has surely violated the site's terms of service. But as vile and painful as the president's tweets often are, they're performing an important role in American democracy right now. One of the functions of presidential communication is transparency, and Trump's tweets serve as a constant reminder of who he is and what his administration values. We don't want his aides to take his phone and mute his tendency to attack, or his habit of making false claims and smearing the media outlets charged with holding the government accountable. The best outcome in this very bad situation is for us to be confronted, over and over, with the nature and beliefs of our president. There is very little for democracy to gain by hiding this president under a cloak of conventional phrases. Over the past decade or so, questions have emerged among scholars about the effectiveness and impact of presidential communication. Perhaps the most famous among them was George Edwards' book on deaf ears, which suggested that televised presidential speeches often fail to reshape public opinion. Other scholars have found greater impact in experiments and studies of particular audiences, and still others have argued that public rhetoric has other purposes. While this scholarly debate has not been resolved, it's hard to claim that major televised presidential addresses are the most dynamic or relevant format. The days of everyone tuning in to the same 3 channels are gone. Twitter is not the largest social media platform, and it's likely that those paying attention to the president's tweets are those who are already attentive to politics. But this is a general feature of political discourse. What Twitter lacks in mass appeal, it makes up for in interaction and brevity. Trump's tweets are often undignified in content, but they are strangely vital and innovative in form. They offer a distinct idiom as well as the opportunity for others to respond. The quote tweet function allows commentators to visually append their own remarks to the president's original ones. Audio and video clips exist, of course, but the effect is different. Twitter can be a cesspool of hatred and bigotry, but when used well, it can also be a tremendously flexible and democratic medium. The tension between dignity and democracy has informed presidential communication for a long time. How presidents communicated in the 19th century is also the subject of some heated scholarly debate, believe it or not. To the extent we might understand that norms about speech-making or campaigning were intended to preserve the dignity of the office, we might also think a bit about the context. Why would maintaining a certain distance from the rough and tumble of democratic politics be important in the 19th century? Part of the answer is that politics could be pretty messy and rugged. President atop a federal bureaucracy that wasn't terribly developed, while Congress maintained more control over federal patronage networks. Nomination practices meant that second or third-tier politicians roused to the presidency. Corruption was common. Against this backdrop, it makes sense that presidents might keep some distance from the practice of democratic politics. Modern presidential politics offer the opposite, and as I've argued elsewhere, the mix of casual, deliberately undignified uses of media heightens a sense of democracy around the presidency. These appearances soften the idea of a strong presidency and create a sense of intimacy and openness. Social media and new forms of media have taken this to a new level. Earlier forms of communication forced presidents to go through institutional barriers to access the public, from party newspapers to television networks. The immediacy of Twitter is unfiltered as well as informal, and at a time when institutional constraints seem especially important, the direct communication nature of the medium is unsettling. We should be unsettled, and we should ask ourselves why. Trump exists at a presidential crossroads of sorts. He occupies the same terrifyingly powerful office that Barack Obama and George W. Bush did, fortified by administrative developments, the Cold War, and the post-9/11 world. But his presidency has some prominent 19th century elements: its parochialism and inattention to federal governance. Although Trump was nominated through the modern process, the 2016 process in some ways resembled that of divided parties like the Democrats in 1844 or the Republicans in 1884, with the dispute resolved through primaries instead of conventions. Norms about presidential communication address anxieties around the office, but can vary greatly in how they suit individual presidents. Twitter amplifies what made Trump an effective campaigner, and exposes his unfitness to govern. The ideas expressed in his tweets are reminiscent of the crude, loyalty-oriented, and exclusionary politics of this bygone era. In this regard, Twitter, this most contemporary of media, performs a crucial democratic function. It reminds us that despite the modern practices of the office, including the occasional televised speech, its occupant is fundamentally retro. Thank you for watching. For the follow-up, subscribe to the channel yourself here. Tweets have zero benefit and criticize the administration's defense of them as childish. Republicans will arrive at the 2018 elections with absolutely no accomplishments and nothing to run on, Tyler said. In order to effect large-scale public policy change through legislation, you have to have a communication strategy to convince the country that the direction you're going is somewhere they'd like to go. While Trump's attack on Thursday morning provoked a big response, the Morning Joe hosts have a notorious love-hate relationship with the president. During the 2016 campaign, Trump was a frequent calling guest to the show, and as recently as March retained Joe Scarborough's advice on matters before addressing Congress. But the MSNBC show has also faced criticism for being too cozy with the administration. In a Vanity Fair report from May on the co-host's recent engagement, the couple acknowledged meeting with the president more than a week after his inauguration, where Trump reportedly suggested they have their wedding at Mar-a-Lago or the White House. According to Scarborough, Trump even suggested he could be the one to marry them. Scarborough and Brzezinski have since become increasingly critical of the president, and Trump has repeatedly attacked them on Twitter, but Thursday's messages marked a new low. Brzezinski responded to Trump shortly after his tweets on Thursday with her own post of a Cheerios box detailing a child and the slogan "Made for Little Hands," a seemingly pointed reference to the campaign trail during which Trump's hand size was often targeted. MSNBC, meanwhile, was direct and unsparing in its criticism. It's a sad day for America when the president spends his time bullying, lying and spewing petty personal attacks instead of doing his job, an MSNBC spokesperson said, echoing a similar sentiment from the organization's spokesman Mark Kornbly, who tweeted that he never imagined. I would think to myself, it is beneath my dignity to respond to the President of the United States. It was not immediately clear what specific comments set off the Twitter attacks this morning, but Brzezinski did hit the president this morning on lying and destroying the country. Nothing makes a man feel better than making a fake cover of a magazine about himself, lying every day and destroying the country, Brzezinski said in reference to a Washington Post report that alleges a fabricated Time magazine cover photo featuring Trump is hanging in at least 5 of his golf clubs. Also, on Tuesday's episode of Morning Joe, Brzezinski and Scarborough went back and forth on Trump's hand size and his onslaught of media-focused tweets of late. "That's a very small person," Brzezinski said. "I work in cable news and I can't tell you that's sad, pathetic. Think bigger," Scarborough countered, adding that while the worst healthcare strategy ever rages, Trump's talking about the media. "Keep on being small," Brzezinski said. "Tiny. That's the word," Scarborough corrected. On the campaign trail, the president was often criticized for his treatment of women, most notably after the infamous Access Hollywood tape in which Trump can be heard bragging about sexually assaulting women. And in a bizarre moment on Tuesday, while on the phone with Ireland's new Prime Minister, Trump called forward an Irish journalist to comment on her smile. Despite the furore around his tweets on Thursday, Trump did get some support outside of the White House. Fox News primetime host and frequent Trump defender Sean Hannity tweeted various links to Morning Joe-related coverage. "Maybe Liberal Joe should stop calling the POTUS a schmuck, a liar, a thug and mentally unhinged. Were they kissing POTUS acid Xmas?" "Yes," he tweeted. Sen. Richard Shelby Arala also appeared to defend the president, noting that he's dealing with an adversarial news media. "The media is salting him every day," Shelby said. "I guess he's fighting back." Other lawmakers, however, said they were trying to tune it out. Sen. Ron Johnson otherwise said he didn't want to talk about the president's tweets because he's trying to stay positive. "If you don't have something nice to say nothing at all," Johnson said. "The American people need us to be focused on health care and tax reform, not Twitter fights and cable news," Sen. Tim Scott RSC said on Twitter.